but I'm okay with limiting third trimester abortion. That's my particular.
So you would you think that the government should eliminate a woman's right to choose?
All right,
move on to what you
let's
want.
move along then. I think it's a very pressing issue that we're going to be. You said that freedom was important to you, human rights important to me. The way I'm seeing this, we're looking down the barrel of massive rollbacks of human rights and freedoms under a second Trump administration. I don't know how you can see that otherwise, basically, between, like, I'm thinking, women losing their rights and immigrants definitely losing their rights. I mean, trans people losing the right to just even feel safe and exist in society. I'm like, where's the freedom in any of this? I'm not seeing the freedom.
What human rights, for example, are women losing?
Like their right to bodily autonomy.
Okay, so what's Trump's plan that's going to take away a woman's right to bodily autonomy?
He punted back abortion to the states.
Okay.
So that's the answer to your question.
So if Trump wasn't elected and, say, Kamala was elected, she would have done what? An executive order?
I don't know what legislation again, we need some sort of amendment. We don't have the votes for said amendment. I understand the realpolitik behind it. I don't know what is the best solution to enshrine a constitutional right to abortion in this country. I'm just saying that before Trump, we had Roe v. Wade as the law of the land. That's how it should be. It should never have gone away. I attribute that to Trump, and I think that's one of the reasons why he has been bad for the country.
Okay, so just to be clear, you have zero, despite the fact that you said that women will lose this right of theirs, you have zero example whatsoever of how it would have been different under Kamala than Trump at all. You admit that Trump's basically not going to do anything and it's up to the states, and you don't have any articulation of how that would have been different under Kamala. Just let's start from there, correct?
I would say that it's already been that Trump has made the world worse by by punting abortion back to the states. If you want to specifically talk about the future of his second term, then we can talk about the massive human rights violations that are going to come with mass deportation.
We could get on to those other issues. You outlined a bunch. I often hear this, that specific individuals will lose rights. So we're starting with women. That's the call that I heard the most from Democrats. Women will lose rights if Trump's elected. You can't articulate.
They've already lost the rights.
So you're saying,
they've lost them already.
So you're saying regardless if Trump would have been elected this point or not, he will now have no net benefit or degradation to women's rights. It's already happened. It's already done.
I'm not saying that.
Then what will the net decrease in women's rights be now that Trump's in office?
I don't know what Trump will be able to do from this point to further.
So you don't have you have no articulation. Got it. Okay.
I do have an articulation, Rob. Remember how I said that Trump already did this?
But we're talking about Trump's.
And then I said, if you want to talk what he's going to do in the future in his second term, we can talk about mass deportations. Remember that.
Okay. So when it comes to women's rights, you have no example of anything that Trump's going to do in this term that will affect women's rights at all. Cool. Now let's talk specifically what he did.
He hasn't talked about anything. He won't talk about his healthcare plan. He won't talk about if he wants to do a national.
It's a nice deflection.
Plan.
We got you. It's a nice deflection. So you've talked about how women's rights will be under attack with Trump. You can't give any examples. So you can't give any examples of what he'll do in this term. So now let's look back.
Past matters, man.
No, it doesn't when we're talking about what he will do this time. So if we're trying to decide will Trump be good or bad, then we're using that comparatively, right? Going forward, will Trump be good? Okay, we're going to stick with women's rights. Now that you can't articulate anything that he will do in this term to negatively affect women's rights, let's go back and look at what he did in 2016 to 2020. Now, he didn't punt the issue back to the states, correct? What did he do? Can you articulate what he did?
Yeah, they overturned Roe v. Wade.
Who does they?
The Supreme Court.
Okay, so Trump had nothing to do with that. He merely appointed
the 3 members that were integral in the repeal.
Was he allowed to appoint? Is that within the democratic process that he's allowed to appoint these judges?
Yep.
Okay, and is it true that judges oftentimes interpret the Constitution in different ways?
Is this a real question?
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, so the argument then that Trump didn't do anything illegal, you're just saying that by appointing the judges that he appointed, that resulted in women losing rights, which was bad. Now, do you think that the Supreme Court, it's important for the Supreme Court to do what their constitutional duty is, which is to interpret the law? Mm-hmm. So you don't want the Supreme Court creating law, correct?
Nope.
Okay. Are you aware what the 10th Amendment says?
Yep.
What's it say?
Says that any power that is not enumerated within the Constitution and the Bill of Rights that is reserved for the federal government is a power for the people.
For the states. It would go to the states, correct?
Sure.
Okay. So then can you explain to me, is abortion ever mentioned in the Constitution?
No.
Okay. So then why did the court in Roe determine that a woman had a right to abortion?
I'm not a legal scholar.
But if you're making the argument that Trump was bad for women's rights, but you're also saying that it's important for the court to not create law, then you have to understand that if the court actually
I think it's more important for women to have rights than it is for the court not to create law.
So you say that a woman's right to abortion is more important than the court holding to their constitutional duties?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I think we could see who's a danger to people's rights then. Because what you're saying is your opinion...
I think human rights are more important than the Supreme Court fulfilling its duties.
But the best document to enshrine our human rights is the Constitution. And by blatantly being unconstitutional...
I don't know,
saying
is it?
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes, of course it is. It's your rationale as to exactly what the establishment has done when they attack such as our First Amendment. When they say, well, we're going to have panels on disinformation that will censor people's ability to speak. And they would say, well, because the Constitution's not as important as this particular issue of ours. And our issue right now is we can't have people disagreeing
with the Constitution just so he could stay in power in 2020.
Trump talked specifically about what he thought was a stolen election and said that some of the constitutional things about when we have elections needed to be put on hold
so
if the election was stolen.
It was more important for Trump to stay in power than the Constitution. So why is saying that human rights are more important than the Constitution such a big deal? I mean, can we not all agree? Rob, do you not agree that human rights are more important than the Constitution?
No, I would say that the Constitution is where we get our governmental enforcement of our rights. The problem is we're going to disagree on what a right is. So what you've justified allowing to, for example, if I say I have a human right to have a machine gun, to have an AK-47 that's fully automatic, I have a human right to that. I feel that that's my human right. And you say, well, actually, the law says differently. That, you know, and I say, fuck all that, I don't care. Would you say that's legitimate?
No, I would say that your priorities are different than my priorities.
Right. So it's your opinion on what's a human right. Do I have a human right to life?
Again, like if you're going down to morality, those are all subjective
preferences. No. You're saying that Trump is uniquely bad because he appointed Supreme Court justices, which I'll be able to articulate did the correct thing legally in overturning Roe v. Wade. You're saying that doesn't matter.
Morally incorrect.
You're saying that doesn't matter because morally women should have a right to choose. Now we're going to get into the morality of it, right? And so I'm asking you if people have a right to life.
Mm-hmm.
Would your right to life supersede someone's right to choose?
Would my right to life supersede? Yeah.
So, for example, if I choose to punch you in the face,
yes, your right to punch ends at my face or whatever the saying is.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I know what you're saying. You're going to extend it to a fetus, but the thing is that the Constitutional Bill of Rights doesn't extend to the fetus. It extends to U.S. citizens, and you get your citizenship at birth.
One, why would that matter? You just said you don't give a shit. Human rights supersede what the Constitution says.
Yeah, and
okay. So then, what's it matter if the Constitution applies to fetuses?
My personal moral preference is in alignment with the Constitution on this.
When does life begin?
I think that a life, as in a human person being, begins at birth.
Okay, so then you would say that it should be absolutely a woman's right to choose before the umbilical cord's cut to kill that baby.
At birth.
Okay,
I would also say, Rob,
define birth.
If I was going to ask you how long you've been alive, you would tell me you're in your 40s, and you would not add 9 months to that. So
I'm still alive before that.
Let's not act like we both don't start counting life from birth, because we both do.
When you count with something like years is different than when we consider something life. We can understand that there's something different and that we will start.
But if I ask you how long have you been alive, you're not going to start from your conception.
I would say my birthday is July 4th, 1984.
But if I ask you how long have you been alive, you would start from your birth, and so would.
That's not true. It's irrelevant to colloquially how we would discuss those things as to whether or not. So that's. So again, I will say,
it's also in the Bible.
I'm going to get my point out come hell or high water. I understand that you want to filibuster on this, so I just want to be clear. You said that a woman should have a right to abortion unimpeded, correct? Unimpeded. It should be her choice up until birth. Define birth.
You don't know what birth is?
That's right, because I said until the umbilical cord's cut. You said no. You were like birth.
When the baby is no longer inside the mom, that baby has been born.
So just to be clear, if the baby's bottom's out, but the head's inside, is it birthed?
I don't know, Rob.
Why are you shaking your head? This seems to be important when we decide we could kill something.
It's not important to me.
It's not important to you when we could take a life.
Dude, like, when is this happening? That the baby's
Well, I'll tell you this. I had a debate in college where we debated Casey, which was the 92 decision that reaffirmed Roe. And I lost this debate to a radical feminist that told me that until the umbilical cord was cut, she had the right to kill it. And I was taking away her choice if I said otherwise. So I'm starting under that, which is one of the most extreme positions from someone who is heavily involved in abortion politics. So I'm trying to ask you when exactly the cutoff is. This seems to be important because when we're talking about when legally...
They're born, dude. But I told you the cutoff.
So if they're halfway breached, that would be considered born to you?
I don't know. That's a gray area, man. I would just leave the decision between that woman and her medical doctor.
So even in that decision, where the baby's halfway breached, you would say you're unwilling to have the law intervene. It should only be up to the woman and the doctor.
I mean, if the baby's halfway breached, right, and the woman's about to die...
That's not the question.
Well,
you're adding things.
Between the woman, the medical doctor, like, they come to that decision based on the medical facts.
That's not true. For example, I forget, there was an article in, I believe, The Atlantic, where this doctor who specializes in late-term abortion says he'll give one for any reason, it doesn't matter, and far over 50% of the ones he gives into 8 and 9 months of pregnancy are for purely elective reasons. Has nothing to do with the safety of the woman or the health of the baby.
Why is it, Rob, that I want to talk about human rights? I try to bring up mass deportation, and now you're talking to me about the rights of a fetus.
The reason is because when people hyperbolically talk about what a threat to rights Trump will be, and then you interrogate what those threat to rights will be, they have no backing whatsoever. So you've already illustrated that you have no backing to how Trump would be threat to women's rights this time. And then when we said, okay, you're just upset about the overturning of Roe, you can't defend why the overturning of Roe, in my estimation, was good legal practice. And so then you say, well, you should just have a human right to kill that baby because it's not really a baby. And
okay,
I say,
in Roe, didn't they were ruling from like the 14th Amendment, right?
Right to privacy.
They were using it based on amendments in the Constitution and what their interpretation of
rights,
that was.
Right,
they
equal rights and a right to privacy.
Basis.
Right, equal rights and a right to privacy. None of those things are specifically outlined with abortion. It's absurd to think so. For example, we can see those things are overruled with things like the Patriot Act, right? So the idea that you should be able to kill a baby because you have a right to privacy is nonsensical, or an equal rights as a woman. It's just
this is actually why I started the conversation by asking you how much your religious views impact your politics, because a lot of the people that I ask why they support Trump, they'll just go to abortion first of all, and I've just found that like the abortion debate is a difficult one to have because ultimately like there's just such a difference in worldview where like the one side thinks that this like the fetus has a soul and is like a human person.
Have you heard me say anything like that?
It's religious belief. And then
you haven't heard me say anything like that. The problem is that the position you're advocating for is grotesque and out of line with the vast majority of people in this country, thank God. I think that the people in this country are too left on pro-choice arguments, but you haven't heard me make any sort of religious argument or arguments of the soul whatsoever. You have defended that a woman at 9 months pregnancy before birth should be allowed to terminate that baby for any reason, which is a grotesque and monstrous fucking position. And for you to imply that that somehow means if we don't allow that, that's an attack on women's rights, I think should clarify to everyone that's listening how absurd and egregious these attacks on Trump are that you're going to be making.
Can you give me one other example where, like you said, that somebody's rights to punch extend for as far as somebody's face is? So can you tell me what human rights apply to a person who is physically located inside of another person?
It doesn't matter.
No, it does matter, right? Because you said that I have the right to punch until that punch is close to somebody's face. So what are the human rights that you would have if you physically lived inside of another person? What rights do you have in that situation, Rob?
Let's say hypothetically that there are giant people that come down, giant spaces.
And you live inside one.
And I live inside. So I no longer have rights? You could kill me?
I'm just saying, like,
I'm asking you.
You have if you exist inside of another person, how do their rights and your rights intersect?
The fact that the Constitution doesn't specifically say these rights apply to people that live in all of these situations is irrelevant. So I'm asking you specifically.
It applies to citizens, and you become a citizen at birth.
No, it doesn't just apply to citizens.
some of the Bill of Rights applies to non-citizens, but most apply to citizens.
Well, it's not just the Bill of Rights, but certainly some would apply. Like, for example, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, they say is to all peoples, correct?
Yeah, unborn people.
So, for example,
really
if there is a guest,
and here's another thing.
let me finish my point. So, for example, if there is someone who is a guest of our country who has a passport and decides to come visit the beautiful city of Pittsburgh that's around me, can I just say, well, I'll kill them? They're not a citizen, so they don't have rights.
No.
Can I say that? Why not?
Do you remember what I just said about how some rights apply to non-citizens, but not all?
So we're talking specifically about the right to life. You have it illustrated how the right to life only applies to citizens.
Okay, look.
So you gave a non-analogous example of what we're talking about.
Happen to agree with the UN Charter on Human Rights in this issue, where it says specifically that the right to life does not apply to the unborn, okay? So
I don't give a shit what the UN says. I don't give a shit, right? You can't
I'm just saying that
your position is grotesque.
Subjective preferences, okay?
Let me ask you this.
And we have differing preferences.
The European Union, your advocacy is for a woman should be allowed to terminate up to birth, which would include 9 months. Does the UN countries allow that?
With if it's in the medical interest of the woman. I don't personally
Wait. If it's in the medical
let me finish my stance, Rob, because you've been misattributing my stance. I think you've been misunderstanding my stance on this whole thing, okay? I am against regulations on first and second trimester abortions. For third trimester abortions, right? I personally am fine with regulating to the point where there are exceptions for the health of the mother, right? There are exceptions for attenuating circumstances like incest, rape, whatever. But I'm okay with limiting third trimester abortion. That's my particular.
So you think that the government should eliminate a woman's right to choose?
I think that there are room for compromise. It's not something that I'm not willing to die on the hill for third trimester, yes or no, whatever. I think that there's room to negotiate there. That's my own personal take on it, okay? Since you didn't ask what my personal take on it was you still didn't. I'm just telling you, that's my own personal take, okay?
So there are circumstances where you would say, because you value the right to life of the fetus in certain circumstances, that you're against the woman's right to choose, and you would be okay with government laws regulating that.
I'm for compromise. Personally, okay? I would just have it be the woman's right the whole way, but I'm for compromise. I think
that's not an answer.
For example,
that's not an answer.
I think that the way that Ireland does it is fine. I'm like, Ireland had this specifically where they had compromise on the third trimester. I'm fine with that. I understand there's arguments for and back and forth, whatever. I don't really debate abortion. I've never done it on my channel. It's not a subject that I've ever gone.
You brought it up. Yeah, these aren't things that I'm bringing up. You brought it up. I tried
to get the topic to mass deportation, Rob.
What you did, let me explain what you did. You made a bunch of hyperbolic talking points. Trump's taking away people's rights, like women's. And then we started to interrogate, and you can't defend that position. And so now you want to run from the position because you realized how grotesque your position was, defending 9-month abortions. And so now you're like, well, even though personally I would allow 9-month abortions, I'm okay with the government saying you can't have them except for exceptions like the woman's life. So you are for, in certain instances, the government taking away a woman's right to choose. So for example, if Kamala Harris would have ran on the position, I'm going to pass an executive order that says women can have a right to abortion in first and second trimester, but in the third trimester, she cannot unless her life's in jeopardy or there's certain circumstances with the child. And Trump ran on the position he did, which was, look, we're leaving it up to the states. I'm not going to sign a national abortion ban. Which one would have been more antithetical to a woman's right to choose?
I wasn't paying attention to anything that you were just talking about. Well, it
seems to illustrate that this isn't a worthwhile debate if you're not going to engage in it back and forth and give me the dignity of listening to me.
Okay, well...
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Okay, Rob, really, I think that... I don't know how your audience can be enjoying this right now. Like, I wanted to talk about... I brought up my 3 points I wanted to talk about.
You hit a topic, and then when you're proven wrong, you're like, can we move? That's what you do. You hit a topic, and then when you're proven wrong, you're like, I want to move to something else.
Okay, so you're saying that I was proven wrong.
Correct.
That Trump is bad for human rights because he's taken away women's freedom to abortion. I was proven wrong about that.
You are absolutely, you said that he would be bad for women's rights. I asked what he would do in this term. You couldn't give any examples. Then you said, but it was bad that he kicked it to the states. Then we went and you were like, well, okay, he appointed judges, which overturned Roe. Then you were unable to articulate whether or not that was good legal policy, and in fact said, you're okay if it's unconstitutional that they wouldn't have overturned Roe because you think that a woman's right to choose is more important. So then we started to get into hypotheticals. Well, then what do you define as being an important woman's right to choose? Does that supersede a right to life?
Rob, just please, man,
if you don't want to do a debate, if you don't want to, I have to walk through how we got to where we are because you're arguing, well, we need to move on because you're being embarrassed on the subject. No, I could say since you're incapable, I'll say this for 30 seconds, then we'll move on since you're incapable. You would be forced to say that if Kamala Harris was for third trimester abortions being eliminated, that she was anti-woman's right to choose. And therefore electing her would have been taking away women's rights, and that would be worse than Trump that said, I'm just going to leave it up to the states. So in that articulation, I think we could prove the absurdity of your argument that Trump's taking away women's rights is absurd. You know nothing about what you're talking about and have tried to run from the conversation as soon as you made it because you realized you're outclassed.
No, I think you're misreading the situation here. I think that the honest reading about this is that personally, as two dudes, I don't debate this topic. I mean, that is the end all.
Then why would you say that he's taking away women's rights if you're like, I don't want to talk about it?
I was listing multiple things, Rob.
But you listed one thing that is the most common thing.
No, I didn't. You just stopped listening after the first
No. Okay, if I say this person should be executed for the following 4 reasons, and your argument's going to be, I think all 4 of these reasons are bullshit, so let's go through them one by one. And as soon as you go through the first one, I'm like, I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to talk about that. Let's move on to another one. It seems to suggest that you're saying shit that you don't know what you're talking about.
So let's address what you just said then, right? You said that it would be worse if Kamala were to eliminate third trimester abortions.
That would be against
versus Trump's policy of just passing it along to the state. You're saying
that's what you would have to say.
Would be more of like threatening women's right to choose.
Correct.
Which, if her policy was just blanketly getting rid of third trimester abortions with no exceptions in all states in America, I might agree with you. But I think it's kind of a weird and useless hypothetical. But here's the difference and why I said might agree with you, right? You're taking away women's right to a third trimester abortions for every state in the union versus only half the states in the union, whatever the number.
He's leaving it up to the states.
Yeah, leaving it up to states where the states will be stripping away that right for women. That could be for all trimesters. It could be
Give me an example of a state that's done it for all trimesters.
So I'm just saying that it does depend. And I know you hate me injecting nuance and subtlety and actually looking at the different factors, but there are it just depends on the specifics, Rob. You can't just make these ambiguous blanket statements like this is worse than this because it depends on the specifics. Like in Texas, where I live, the abortion laws have been awful and women have literally died because they had miscarriages or like sepsis or literally having health emergencies where they needed an abortion for their own life and were not able to receive one and died. That has happened in this state.
So there was one example that I heard of, and it turned out, I don't know if it was in Texas, but the case that people cited most was actually a woman who died because she took the anti-abortion pill and doctors didn't operate fast enough and had nothing to do with the overturning of Roe. It's just an excuse.
But that is not the example that I'm bringing up.
Give me the example. What was the woman's name?
Jessica Bonarki or something like that.
Okay, and so what happened? Can you explain to me exactly what happened?
So she had a miscarriage, I believe, that basically you have to go in and you have to clear out the remains of the fetus, which is technically an abortion. And so being unable to perform this because the doctors were concerned that they were going to lose their license, they were not able to, and she went into like sepsis, basically. Like
I don't believe this story at face value. It's something I'd be willing to, because the last time that we've heard a story of this, it turned out to be inaccurate when this woman who took the anti-abortion pill. Secondly, I don't think that the law is specifically going to say that if someone has a dead fetus inside them, that the law says that it can't be removed.
That's true, though. That is the law in Texas.
So the law in Texas says if there's a dead fetus inside you, you can't have it removed.
Yeah.
I don't believe that.
Okay.
Show me the law.
Okay. Well, we'll pull it up then. I don't know
Cool.
how to find it exactly.
I don't believe that at all. I think that's bullshit. So you mean to say that they just have to live for the next 10, 15, 20 years with the dead
No, they
fetus?
just can't use an abortion to clear it.
Oh, so they could clear it in certain ways.
I don't know what the alternative ways to clear it are or how long they take.
Isn't abortion defined as taking away a living fetus?
Yeah, we're getting also lots of different names in the chat of women. Avery Davis Bell. Here's the one, Jessica Barnica. That's the one I was thinking of.
Jessica Barnica.
Nicole Thurman. There's multiple in Texas that this has already happened.
Okay, so your argument is that the law in Texas says that if there is a fetus inside you, they can't get rid of it through what we would normally call an abortion. So they have to do some other intervention to take the baby out.
I will look at the exact phrasing of the law. I'll pull it up here. Let's see. So, wait, maybe her name is not Jessica. Josely Barnica. And yeah, she was, let's see. It would be a crime to intervene in her miscarriage at the Texas hospital that she is at.
So just to be clear, that's, if I'm judiciously interpreting this as best as possible, what you just said, that has nothing to do with what you just said 5 seconds ago.
Well, it said here, the fetus was on the verge of coming out. So its head pressed against her dilated cervix. And let's see, they offered to speed up the delivery to enter her uterus to stave off a deadly infection that she had. But they had to wait until there was no longer a heartbeat because it would be a crime to do the procedure while it still had a heartbeat. And so they had to wait for, I guess she wasn't able to receive treatment for 40 hours and died.
So your initial claim that a dead fetus inside a person, it's illegal to remove,
that was bullshit. Remove a dead fetus, yes.
So that was bullshit. You were absolutely wrong about that. Just to clarify.
Yeah, I was incorrect about that.
My guess is
the reason why these women were dying was because the fetus still had a heartbeat and they weren't able to get the abortion until they had to wait for the fetus to be dead. So I was wrong about the dead remains in the womb.
Okay, so what I would say is it's probably a misinterpretation of the law. I haven't looked at the specific Texas law. I'll claim ignorance on that. I knew what you were saying was bullshit. But my guess is the law says after a certain point that you're not allowed to remove a living fetus unless the woman's health is in jeopardy. There's a risk of loss of life. And I'm guessing the way this would be implied is the doctors will say, well, we didn't know what that risk was. We didn't know what the risk of this woman was. We knew that there were potential health effects, but we didn't know how severe. And unfortunately, she ended up passing. So I'm betting that what this would be a misapplication of the way the law was written. Nonetheless,
but just to be clear, right? You did the disclaimer before you made that statement about what you think it is, that you are actually ignorant and don't know anything about the specifics about either the law or this.
No, what I'm saying is when I asked you, people say this all the time. I've heard one case that was brought up nationally that was used incorrectly. And then I said, what are the specifics? It's clear that I'm saying I don't know what the specific Texas law is by the fact that I'm asking you. You gave an explanation.
So then why would you offer
You gave an explanation
if you don't have.
You gave an explanation. What do you mean? Why am I offering my thoughts on it? I didn't offer my thoughts on what the Texas law said. You said that there were states that had laws that wouldn't allow.
You said it was a misreading of the Texas law.
That's right. I knew that it was a misreading of the law that you said.
Well, how do you know it's a misreading if you don't know any of the details?
Because what you said was so specifically outlandish that it beggars belief that any first world country.
We're not talking about what I said.
Yes, we were.
We're talking about the story. No, wait. We're talking about, you said that the story that this Jessica Barnacki, you said that the story, independent of anything that I said, you said that the story was likely not going to be true because it was likely just a misreading of the Texas law. And you acknowledge the fact that you know nothing about either the Texas law or the specifics of the case, but you're still offering that commentary. Why?
Okay, 2 things. 1, I initially knew that your statements that you were making were complete bullshit. You admit they were. Correct? Cool. We're good there.
Wrong.
Secondly, I'm saying that I'm guessing that this is a misapplication of the law. That I'm guessing, this is why I asked you to read this.
But why are you guessing that?
Because I'm highly doubting that the Texas law says that even if the woman will die, you can't do an abortion. I bet that that's bullshit. That's what I'm saying.
So, but why?
Prove me wrong. Because it would be outlandish that happened.
Because it happened, and it was
would be,
illegal.
listen, it would be outlandish that happened, and it's not the biggest story in the news cycle of this election. If there's
because
literally
people like you, Rob,
no, that's not true. That's not true.
They just don't believe
that's not true. If the law,
right now on stream.
Listen, I understand the need to filibuster. I get it. If the law literally said, even if the woman will die, no abortion. If that law is on the books right now in Texas, I'll guarantee it would have been the biggest story going into this election.